Let's bring in William Pellerin. He's a trade lawyer and joined us now to talk some more about this. Thanks for your time today.
Great being here.
So advocates for the lumber industry in BC, we spoke yesterday, say more than anything, a deal between Ottawa and Washington on lumber needs to be worked out. At this point, can you even see that happening?
We don't really see it just yet. I don't think there's any oxygen in the room for a lumber deal at this point. The parties are not talking, and from everything that we've heard, lumber seems to be a little bit below the priority to get steel and aluminum and perhaps an auto deal on the table.
Yeah. Loans are being provided for lumber companies. We heard that from the Prime Minister yesterday. You say wood product ecosystem is about to collapse. First, explain the kinds of products you're talking about, and if you've seen anything from Ottawa that benefits them specifically.
Yeah, so the wood products sector in Canada is much larger than we might think. It includes everything from the kitchen cabinet manufacturers to the furniture manufacturers to the panel manufacturers and everyone else that benefits from the mills, from the tree all the way down to the end consumer. A lot of these companies are now facing a very large tariff into the United States through those national security tariffs on things like kitchen cabinets and furniture. That are going to hit very, very hard. And we're seeing a lot of clients with red ink at the gross margin level, companies whose exports to the United States are in the dozens and hundreds of millions that are going to zero basically overnight. And so while there are some small loan programs that might allow for bridging or taking on more debt, there is absolutely need to get something in place to provide some relief for that sector, whether by a tariff in place in the same way as the government has announced for steel, but certainly a dire need that we're seeing in the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, my coffee table threatens me all the time, so I know what it's about. Let's talk about steel derivatives, a new tariff that Ottawa has put on from steel derivative products coming into the country. Is this a good idea? Will this work to support our industry?
I think the Prime Minister has certainly said that there's a lot of importance being attached to making sure that our steel mills are operating at capacity, that products are made in Canada. And so on top of restricting foreign supply from a number of countries on the steel products themselves, we're now adding this 25% to what you describe as the steel derivative list. The full list has not yet been published, but it includes things like doors and windows, fasteners, which are screws and nails, various prefabricated structures, steel and iron cloth products, and all sorts of other kind of goods that are made with steel. So again, this is a highly controversial move because, again, it will add costs on Canadian consumers. Just adding a tariff, we've been saying that to the United States, that a tariff is a cost on consumers. But in this case, the Prime Minister felt that it was warranted to make sure that the steel mills are operating and the steel ecosystem is able to sell more domestically by putting a pause on a lot of those imports.
Yeah, I guess we create that hole, of course, where if we're not making enough of those fasteners, for example, the people who use the fasteners are going to have to pay more for the ones they're getting out of the U.S. And I'm not sure that our industry can transition fast enough to make some of that supply in a shorter period of time. Okay, there's also going to be limits on imports of steel, even with our trading partners. Will this be an initiative you think that'll bolster steel at home?
So the quantification there that the government has provided is that through these additional measures, they're looking at increasing Canadian steel mill production by about $1 billion, which would be a significant sum. But again, highly controversial, very, very much welcomed by the steel industry in the country, by the steel producers, but certainly one that will create some supply shortfalls in the short term and also anger our trading partners. And that's an important consideration also because, as we know, the government is very keen on adding new trade deals with a number of other countries in order to diversify our sources of exports, right, to grow our exports to outside of the United States. But this measure is a really interesting one because what it does is it imposes a cap on the amount of steel that we can bring in, even from our free trade partners. So there's going to be a cap based on 75% of 2024 volumes from our free trade country partners. And above that cap, so limiting supply from a historical base, there will be a 50% tariff. That's been in place since the summer, but it was previously capped at the actual level of prior imports being 100%. And so now we're bringing that down to 75% of historical volumes, meaning that the domestic industry will be able to make up that shortfall. That's the hope, at least. But in practice, it means that we're going to accept less steel, including from our free trade partners.
We haven't seen a whiplash reaction from Washington. Quite often we do every time some new tariff initiative is announced in this country. Do you think that we are bound to see some sort of reaction? You sort of touched on that before.
I think the reaction is going to come from other countries than the United States. I think the European Union, I think Japan, I think Korea have a lot to say about these measures because that's whom we're restricting supply from. The United States might actually like this measure in some ways because we've excluded them from the application of that tariff specifically. Basically, to give our industry a bit more breathing room without poking the United States in the eye too much.
Got it. I do have to leave it there, William. I always appreciate you joining us on The Close. Thanks for your time.